A millionaire abandoned his baby on the road to not survive. Years later, the millionaire shuddered at being saved by a beggar identical to him. Jonathan Henderson adjusted the knot of his Italian silk tie in front of the Venetian mirror of his mansion, his brown eyes cold as a winter night fixed on his own image while his fingers drummed nervously on the marble countertop. The baby's cry echoed through the luxurious hallways, penetrating every room of the house like a silent accusation. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of whiskey, while whispering to himself, "You have no choice, Jonathan. This baby will destroy everything you've built." Helena would never agree to marry the man who had a child with a maid. The businessman climbed the marble stairs, his heavy footsteps echoing through the empty mansion. Since Lillian's death, the maid who dared to enter his world, the baby's room, hastily decorated and hidden in the farthest wing of the house, kept the biggest secret of his life. Through the half-open door, he observed the crying child in the crib, so small and frail. His heart faltered for a moment when the baby stopped crying upon seeing him. "Why did you have to be born? Lillian should have done what I told her. Now she's dead, and you're the proof." Of my biggest mistake, the black clouds began to form in the sky when Jonathan wrapped the baby in Lillian's blue blanket. His hands, experienced in closing million-dollar deals, now trembled as they touched the delicate skin of his son. The small silver locket, the only gift Lillian had left for the baby, shone faintly in the dim light of the room. Jonathan considered tearing off the jewel, but something stopped him. In his mind, Lillian's last plea echoed, "Promise me you'll take care of him, Jonathan. Promise our son will have a decent life." Descending the stairs with the baby in his arms, Jonathan felt the weight of his visions increase with each step. The phone rang, making him stop halfway. It was Helena, his fiancée, the senator's daughter, his passport to the power he so craved. He let the answering machine pick up the message. "Love, I'm so excited about the wedding preparations. Daddy managed to confirm the governor's presence at the ceremony. Isn't it wonderful? You'll be the most powerful man in the state," she said. The mansion's garage was silent when Jonathan placed the baby on the back seat of his Mercedes. The contrast between the Italian leather and the baby's simple blanket seemed to scream the difference between the two worlds he tried to keep separate. As he started the car, his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he murmured, "It's better this way. You'll have a chance to live without carrying the weight of my name, and I can live without carrying the mark of my weakness," he said without looking at his son, so as not to regret his decision. The first raindrops began to fall as the car left the mansion gates. Jonathan drove in silence, watching in the rearview mirror. As the baby slept, oblivious to his fate, the streets became more deserted as they moved away from the center. In his mind, Lillian's voice still echoed, "Our love may not have been planned, Jonathan, but this baby is proof that something true was born from it." The storm was increasing its strength when Jonathan stopped the car on a deserted road on the outskirts of the city. The place was dark, surrounded by ancient trees that danced with the strong wind. His hands trembled as he opened the rear door. The baby woke up, his eyes so similar to his own, staring at him with an innocence that made him hesitate. "Why do you have to have my eyes? Why did you have to look so much like me?" he asked himself. The cold wind cut his face as he walked with the baby in his arms. With each step, he felt the weight of his decision increase. The little one began to cry, as if sensing the danger. Jonathan stopped, looking at his son one last time. "Don't cry. You're a Henderson, even if no one but me knows it, and Hendersons don't cry. Can't cry." The rain was now falling with full force when Jonathan placed the baby on the ground, protected only by the blanket. The locket briefly shone under a lightning bolt. It was the same locket that Lillian had given Jonathan when they first met. His hands lingered a few seconds longer on the tiny body, feeling its warmth one last time. In his mind, Lillian's voice sounded like a curse. "One day you will regret every choice you made, Jonathan. Fate has mysterious ways of making us pay for our mistakes," he remembered. The path back to the car seemed endless. Each step was accompanied by the baby's cry, mingling with the sound of the storm. Jonathan got into the vehicle, his soaked clothes staining the impeccable upholstery. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw the small blue bundle under the rain. A simple life is better than a life marred by shame. One day, You'll understand, or maybe not. The minutes inside the car seemed eternal. Jonathan couldn't start the engine and leave. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. The sound of the rain was deafening, but it couldn't drown out the baby's cry that still echoed in his ears. He spoke out loud as if trying to convince himself, "You're doing the right thing. This baby deserves a real family, not a father who is ashamed of his existence." The rumble of the engine finally broke the interior silence of the car. Jonathan engaged gear, ready to leave behind the evidence of his weakness. It was then that his eyes caught something in the rearview mirror, lights approaching at high speed. My God, no way. Car, he won't see the baby in the rain. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead as he watched, paralyzed, the lights getting closer and closer to the small blue bundle left on the road. Time seemed to have stopped. In his mind, Lillian's voice sounded stronger than ever. The truth always finds its way, Jonathan, no matter how long it takes. The lights of the approaching car lit up the road like two fusing eyes. Jonathan could see the small bundle of the blue blanket, now so vulnerable under the storm. His heart was beating so hard it seemed to want to escape his chest. In a hoarse whisper, he let slip, "What have I done? My God, what have I done? This can't be the end. It can't end like this." Meanwhile, Hannah quickened her pace down the dark road, her worn shoes soaked by the relentless rain. The blue domestic worker's uniform clung to her body as she struggled against the wind that seemed intent on knocking her down. Her muscles ached after a long day of cleaning houses, but she couldn't stop. She was the only one who still used that deserted path to get home. Her thoughts echoed in the stormy night. God, why did the bus have to break down today of all days? This path gives me the creeps. Especially on a night like this. The storm was increasing its fury, turning the dirt road into a treacherous quagmire. Hannah adjusted the broken umbrella, a useless protection against the force of nature. Her tired eyes tried to see the path ahead, while her feet sank into the mud. It was then that a different sound caught her attention, a faint cry almost drowned out by the storm. That cry sounds like a baby. It can't be what I'm thinking. Or can it? Who would be so cruel as to leave a child on a night like this? Hannah's heart raced when she saw the lights of a car approaching at high speed. For a moment, she thought of waving for help, but something stopped her. The vehicle sped past her like lightning, throwing water on her already drenched clothes. It was. Then she saw it, a small blue bundle in the middle of the road, right in the path of the approaching lights. My God, it really is a baby. He's going to get run over, she thought, too quickly. Without a second thought, Hannah dropped her bag, an umbrella, running towards the bundle. Her feet slipped in the mud, but she couldn't stop. The sound of the engine was getting closer and closer, the lights already illuminating the small bundle on the ground. In her mind, a single plea repeated, "Please, Lord, give me strength. Don't let this child die. I can't let this happen." With one last desperate push, Hannah threw herself over the bundle, rolling to the side of the road. The car sped past, its tires raising a curtain of water where seconds before the baby had been. She clutched the small package to her chest, feeling her heart beating erratically. "Down, little one, calm down. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you while I'm here." Trembling with cold and adrenaline, Hannah carefully opened the soaked blanket. The baby was pale, his skin as cold as marble. A small silver pendant hung around his neck, the only clue to his origin. Her work-worn hands caressed the delicate little face. Who would do such a wicked thing? Baby's breathing became more shallow, more difficult. Her own tears mingled with the rain streaming down her face. "Don't you dare leave me, little one. God wouldn't have put you in my path if it wasn't to save you." The sight of her simple house appeared like a beacon in the storm. Hannah quickened her pace, her legs heavy with exhaustion and the weight of responsibility. The baby let out a faint moan, so faint it was barely audible. "Just a little longer, my love. We're almost there. Don't give up now." With trembling hands, Hannah finally managed to open the door to her home. The modest interior had never felt so welcoming. She hurried to turn on the old heater, wrapping the baby in dry blankets. "Come on, little warrior, react. Show that you're stronger than this cold." Time seemed to drag as Hannah gently rubbed the baby's little arms and legs, trying to restore his circulation. Her silent prayers were interrupted only by the sound of rain on the window. "Our Lady, don't let this little angel depart. He has already suffered too much for such a small life." A flash of lightning illuminated the room, revealing the baby's pale face. Hannah noticed in horror that his lips were turning blue, his skin growing colder despite the blankets. No, 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 react, my love. I'm here with you. I won't let you leave. Suddenly, the worst happened. The baby stopped moving. Hannah put her ear to his tiny chest, desperately searching for any sign of life. The silence that followed was deafening. Oh God, he's not breathing. What do I do? What should I do? Panic took over Hannah as she held the small, lifeless body in her arms, her tears falling on the baby's motionless face while the storm raged outside. Come back to me, little angel. I can't lose you like this, not after having found you. Hannah didn't think twice before initiating mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on the baby. Her trembling hands gently pressed on the tiny chest, recalling the first aid course. She had taken it years ago at the community center. Time seemed frozen as she struggled to bring the child back, her tears mingling with the sweat of the effort. Between compressions, her choked voice whispered, "Come back to me, my angel. I won't give up on you. I can't give up on you now." The first sign of life came as a faint gasp, followed by a weak cry that sounded like music to Hannah's ears. Without wasting time, she wrapped the baby in dry blankets and ran out into the street. The rain was still falling but with less intensity. Her arms protected the child as she shouted for help. A passing neighbor stopped his old car when he saw the scene. "Help me, please. I found this abandoned baby. He needs urgent medical attention. I don't know how long he'll last." The race to the public hospital was an eternity compressed into minutes. Hannah held the baby against her chest, feeling each faint breath like a small victory. The car jolted over the potholes in the road, and she could feel the little one's heart beating irregularly. Her eyes never left the pale little face. "Hold on tight, my love. We're almost at the hospital. You're strong. You're a warrior." The emergency room was packed, but the baby's critical condition meant he was seen immediately. Hannah watched helplessly as the doctors examined the child, her hands clasped in prayer, her lips moving silently. A nurse tried to lead her to the waiting room, but she resisted. "I can't leave him alone. He only has me in this world. He was abandoned. If he wakes up in a strange place, he'll be scared." The following hours were a blur of tests and more tests. Hannah never left the ICU room for a minute, her eyes fixed on the door where the baby had disappeared. When the doctor finally appeared, his grave expression made her heart sink. His words fell like stones. "The baby has a severe heart condition. Without surgery, he won't survive the next month, and the procedure costs more than the hospital can cover," the doctor said, handing her a paper with the cost of the baby's treatment. Hannah felt the world spin as she heard the cost of the procedure. It was more money than she would earn in years of work. Her hands clutched the silver locket she had taken from the baby's neck, the only clue to his origin. With a steady voice, despite the tears, she declared, "No matter what, I'll get this money, even if I have to work day and night. This little angel won't die, not while I can fight," she told the doctor. The following days became a race against time. Hannah barely slept, splitting herself between her regular job, extra cleaning gigs, and the fundraising campaign she had started. She went door to door, telling the story of the abandoned baby to anyone who would listen. Her hands, already calloused from work, were now also marked by the paper flyers she handed out. Every penny counts. "I can't let the lack of money determine whether a child lives or dies." The small hospital room became her second home. Hannah spent every free moment there, talking to the baby, singing lullabies, praying. The machine beeps constantly, marking the irregular rhythm of the tiny heart. One night, as she held his little hand through the incubator, she promised, "You are not alone in this world anymore, my love. Now, you have a mother. I may not be your biological mother, but I will be the one who moves heaven and earth to save you." News of the campaign began to spread through the city. Small donations arrived daily, some coins here, some bills there. Hannah guarded each contribution like a treasure, thanking each donor with tears in her eyes. In her few hours of sleep, she dreamed of the day when she could take the baby home. People still have goodness in their hearts. Maybe that's what this little angel came to teach us. Time, however, was running out. The baby's condition worsened with each passing day, and the amount raised was still far from what was needed. Hannah could see in the doctor's eyes that they were losing hope. One afternoon, after another exhausting day of work and campaigning, she collapsed into a chair beside the incubator. "I won't give up on you. Even if I have to sell my soul, I will get this money." The machines monitoring the baby began to show worrying signs. The doctors increased the medication, but it was like trying to block out the sun with a sieve. Hannah watched helplessly as more and more machines were connected to the tiny body. During the early hours of the morning, alone in the room, she clutched her rosary beads tightly. "Please God, give me more time, just a little more time." The 15th day of hospitalization arrived with devastating news. The hospital administrator entered the room, his cold words cutting through the air like razors. "I'm sorry, But we cannot keep the equipment on without a payment guarantee. We have other patients waiting. If the amount is not deposited by tomorrow, we'll have to turn off the devices." The reality of that situation hit Hannah like a punch. She looked at the baby, so small and fragile amid all those tubes and wires. Her life savings and all the donations barely reached half of the required amount. In her desperation, an idea began to form. "Maybe if I find out who abandoned this little angel, no, I can't think about that now. I need to find another way out." The sun was starting to set when the final ultimatum arrived. A nurse entered the room with an official paper, the notification that the devices would be turned off the next morning. Hannah held the document with trembling hands, her eyes running over the words that sentenced her little angel. Her voice came out as a choked whisper. "What do I do now, my God? How do I save my son?" The hours dragged on like an eternity as Hannah watched over the baby's restless sleep. The silver locket shone under the dim light of the room as if it held a secret that could change everything. She held it between her fingers, observing the details of the jewelry too expensive to have belonged to someone simple. "I won't give up. By tomorrow, I'll find a way." Why doesn't God abandon those who care for others with kindness in their hearts? I know everything will be resolved. You also can't give up, little one, because I won't give up. The next day, Hannah was sitting in the hospital corridor, her silent tears marking the worn linoleum floor. The deadline for payment would end in an hour, and she could still hear the sound of the machines keeping her little angel alive. Her hands clutched the silver locket as if it could give her the answers she so desperately sought. That's when a frail-looking lady, leaning on a cane, stopped in front of her. Her tired eyes had a glint of recognition. "Are you the girl who found the abandoned baby? Please tell me everything about that night. I've heard some things about you, the little baby." The lady, who introduced herself as Mrs. Virginia, listened intently to every detail of the story, her hands trembling more and more. Her pale and haggard face showed signs of a serious illness, but there was an urgency in her gestures that Hannah couldn't understand. When she mentioned the locket, the lady's eyes filled with tears. "I gave that locket to my daughter Lillian on the day she told me she was pregnant." Hannah's heart raced as she heard those words. The lady struggled to her feet, asking to see the baby. Upon arriving at the ICU, Mrs. Virginia pressed her hand against the glass, her eyes fixed on the little face that so resembled her late daughter's. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Lillian died in childbirth, but before she passed away, she made me promise to protect her son. I searched for him for weeks but never thought I'd find my grandson like this." With trembling hands, Mrs. Virginia opened her worn purse and took out a yellowed envelope, stained by time. Her fingers caressed the paper for a moment, as if bidding farewell to something precious. Inside were several old bills, some already faded, all her life savings kept for an emergency. "When I heard about a fundraiser for a sick, abandoned baby, I knew it could be a clue. Use this money. It was for my treatment. But it's too late for me. My grandson needs to live. He needs to know the truth about his origins," the lady said, making Hannah's eyes widen as she saw the amount of money, immediately trying to return the envelope. "I can't accept it, ma'am. It's too much money," but Mrs. Virginia held her hands with surprising strength for someone so frail. "I want my grandson to live. He deserves a chance at life. I've lived long enough." Hannah felt the weight of that envelope in her hands, not only from the money it contained but from the story it carried. Each bill seemed to tell a tale of sacrifice, of years of hard work and saving. Her eyes filled with tears as she counted the money. It was exactly the amount needed for the surgery. Mrs. Virginia watched in silence, her breathing becoming increasingly difficult, but a small smile of satisfaction on her pale lips. "Go, my child. Time is passing. Save my grandson while I can still see." With her heart racing, Hannah ran to the hospital administration, her steps echoing through the empty corridors. The envelope clutched to her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The administrator, who was already gathering his belongings to leave, looked incredulous when she placed the money on his desk. He began to methodically count the bills. Each movement of his fingers seemed like an eternity to Hannah, who couldn't stop thinking about the baby connected to the machines. The hospital administrator could hardly believe it when he finished counting. It was the total amount for the surgery. His face showed a mixture of surprise and relief as he began filling out the necessary paperwork. Next, they went to the baby's room in the ICU, where Virginia, who had slowly dragged herself there, held Hannah's hand tightly. Her breathing was heavier, and drops of cold sweat trickled down her pale forehead. "I need to tell you something about the baby's father. He's a powerful man, someone who destroyed Lillian's life. If my daughter knew what he did to the boy." The machines began to be prepared for surgery while Virginia, growing weaker, insisted on staying with her account. Her skin was pale as wax, but she refused to be examined. There's no more time for me. I need to make sure you know the truth about my grandson's father. He needs to pay for what he did to my daughter." Hannah realized something was wrong with the lady. Her lips were turning blue, her hands getting colder and colder. Virginia began to speak urgently. "The baby's father, he works at the—" A violent coughing fit interrupted her words. Hannah called for help while holding the trembling lady. The doctors rushed to her aid, but Virginia grabbed Hannah's arm with surprising force. Look in the mansion on Rua das. Virginia's body suddenly became motionless, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Hannah screamed for help as the doctors tried to revive her, but it was too late. The lady's last words died on her lips, taking with her the secret of the baby's father's identity. "Please don't go yet. I need to know the truth. I need to know who did this to your grandson." The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions. While the baby was being prepared for surgery, Hannah was arranging Mrs. Virginia's funeral. Her heart was divided between gratitude and pain. She gave her life for her grandson's life. "How will I tell him about this when he grows up?" she wondered. Meanwhile, the doctors were working on the baby's surgery. Hannah went to the hospital chapel, the silver pendant still in her hands. Now she knew that this jewel was the only link between the little one and his true family, a grandmother he would never know, a mother who died to give him life, and a father who preferred to remain in the shadows. After hours of anguish, the surgery was a success. The little baby's heart now beat strong and regular, as if his grandmother's sacrifice had given him a new chance at life. Hannah watched him through the ICU glass, her tears now a mixture of joy and sadness. "You have so much love in your story, my little angel. So much love and so much pain." The next morning, while the baby recovered, Hannah attended Mrs. Virginia's modest funeral. She had no relatives, no one there for her, only the housekeeper she had just met. Virginia promised she would take care of her grandson and keep her promise. "I promise I will take care of him with all the love that you and your daughter devoted to him. I will call him Cole." Back at the hospital, Hannah watched little Cole, now recovering rapidly, her little fighter who had already lost so much in such a short life. She made a silent promise by the crib. "One day, my love, we will discover the whole truth about your story. But for now, you have me, and I have you. That's all we need." Light fell over the hospital as Hannah watched over the baby's peaceful sleep. The silver pendant rested beside the crib, keeping its secrets. Somewhere in the city, a father lived his life unaware that his son had survived, and that a grandmother's sacrifice had changed everyone's destiny. Perhaps it's better this way, my little angel. Some truths hurt too much to be revealed. Day broke when Hannah finally fell asleep in the chair beside the crib. In her dreams, she saw Mrs. Virginia smiling at peace for having fulfilled her final mission. The baby slept peacefully, his little heart beating strong and regular, like a promise that despite everything, life always finds a way. "You are a miracle, my son, a miracle born of the love of two women who gave everything to protect you, and another woman who will also do everything to watch over you."